It's the 25th of October 2021. Welcome everybody. I hope everybody's doing good. I'm Dana Durnford, the nuclear proctologist.org. You can call in at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody's having a good day, of course, unless you're in the nuclear industry. I hope you're suffocating somewhere. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not an energy agency. They're controlled opposition for the nuclear industry, basically, and their job is to promote nuclear. They're not who they claim they are. They're demons for sure. So you think about a nuclear power plant melting down. A nuclear submarine is just as bad. And there's a lot of them that have already sank in the ocean. And the icebreakers, Russia's dumped the reactors in the Arctic, in the ocean. The whole legacy of nuclear is bizarre. Future of Sizewell Cedars' United Kingdom plants. This is a depiction of it, and it's surrounded by farms. And so tonight we have a poll. Should the farms around nuclear power plants be closed? Hang on. Now every night when I do this, I forget, but I got to come over here to the video you're watching right here. I got to scroll down. Wait for it. I have to scroll all the way down. I'll show you. All the way down. Until you see show more. Because if somebody got this video embedded on their site, it's not going to play until I come down. The third time I've done this, each video I have to do it 3 times. And then allow embedding and then save it. Now if the video is embedded on anybody's site, it'll actually play. So when I start the preamble to the video, I do it. When I save it, I have to go back in and re-enable it. And when the video goes live, that's when I have to go in again and allow embedding. So should we close all farms around nuclear power plants, dumps, waste sites, and mixed oxide fuel reprocessing facilities like La Hague in France, Sellafield in the United Kingdom, just to name a couple? Because why would you do this? And I'll show you what I mean. This is just United Kingdom. So here's Sizewell C, not even built, and they're going to have it surrounded by farms. Then you have, oh my God, I'm tongue-tied. They got another one in the United Kingdom. That's the model of it. It's surrounded by farms. Oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember the name. Then the nuclear then they have, I shouldn't be there right now, sorry. Where's it to? Yeah, that's supposed to be down there. We'll get back to that in a second. I'll come up with the name of that in a second. My apologies. Because 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in their organs. So they just had a fire at Sellafield nuclear site. It's had a meltdown for the last 60, I can't even remember, 64 years. It's surrounded by farms. The Limerick nuclear station, we closed it last night. That's the picture they showed you. But here's a different angle, surrounded by farms. So the question is, should they close all the farms around nuclear power plants? We have 16 votes, 100% yes. Because this is the genocides machines. They're hemorrhaging radiation from the fuel pools, let alone from all the fuel stored on the site. So before the video even started tonight, or last night rather, was 23 minutes after the show. I had 51 thumbs up. 14 hours after the show, I had 52 thumbs up. So when I had 1 thumb up in 14 hours, which is impossible, by the way. 3 workers suffer cardiac arrest at Japan's waste incineration plant. 49 microsieverts an hour. So imagine 3 workers having heart attacks at your dump site because of radiation. Fukushima superhero tells kids the archenemy is bad reputation from nuclear crisis. Superhero tells kids the archenemy is bad reputation. Fukushima nuclear disaster magna in Japan, The Nuclear Man by DC Comics in the United States, and kids playing with Reactor toy sets. This is the brainwash machine in overdrive. You think Spider-Man and the Hulk was bad. They never ever slowed down. The Economist, and the positive side of multiple nuclear meltdowns. Kids just need to gargle after being outside. Like we covered this one headline where it say, come visit Fukushima, children even play outdoors. In Japan, that is something that children mostly do anyway. Well, gargling means you're just going to wash the radiation into your body where it's going to sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones, ends up causing you hundreds and hundreds of illnesses. Alice in Wonderland was used to convince the children. So you see how they target, you can see this pattern of how they're targeting children, using all these fairy tales and fables and fake heroes, like, in order to indoctrinate the children, because the children are being brutalized. They're not doing it because they're bored in the nuclear industry. The Diachi Elementary, 4 million becquerels of cesium per square meter in the school, which is 20 kilometers. Chiba is 20 kilometers away from. The food was banned from Chiba from 55 countries. 276,000 becquerels a kilogram. You typically multiply by around 64 to get the square meter. It's 18 million square meters in that study near Tokyo. But in Tokyo, after rainfall, it was 30 million becquerels. These are absurd numbers per square meter. Per square meter, like something the size of your coffee table. So these are incredible numbers. You should have abandoned half of Japan immediately because your power plant broke down. Japan's secrecy law passes the lower house. Prison for inappropriate reporting. We're on the path to a fastest state. Fair Fukushima cover-up now is the worst. And protesting the secrecy law now was an act of terrorism. Japan government promotes the idea you're racist if you avoid the Fukushima products. Bloomberg says the entire process has echoes of George Orwell, nuclear activists to be constantly spied upon. And that's what's exactly going on. I'm under siege for over a decade straight. Japan enacts state secret laws late Friday night amid a revolt. They actually had a fist fight on the floor of the Diet, just like a Congress or a Senate. It criminalizes investigative journalism. Terrorism defined as imposing one's opinions on others, which is that describes the nuclear industry then as terrorism, right? But also think about Jimmy Savile imposing himself on over 1,000 children in the basement of the BBC's. So they're going to keep the inquiry a secret. Somebody who raped over 1,000 children at the BBC. You can't trust your media. Your media is insane. That's a sad world you're living in when you can't turn around and trust your media, yeah? Fukushima radiation will poison food for decades. Study finds. Of course it will. It never stopped hemorrhaging out, as you'll see coming up. Food import ban, key agenda in talks with Japan. So Taiwan, in order to join the Japanese Pacific trade, the first thing they got to do as a sign of good faith is import food from a nuclear wasteland. This is a picture from a newspaper complaining that farmers were being unjustifiably targeted for criticism that their food was radioactive. They're growing it right alongside of thousands of one-ton bags of radiation. Like Hollywood couldn't make it up. Pre-Fukushima, if Hollywood had come out with a horror movie of farmers growing food and harvesting it for market alongside of thousands of one-ton bags of radiation, nobody would believe it because it's stupid. That's impossible. Could never happen. It's normal now. That's the norm in Japan. They've lost their minds and souls, and it's lethal. In 2012, there was 865,000 excess cancers compared to any other year, above and beyond the normal increases. These are lunatics. Somebody can sign with the stroke of a pen and poison hundreds of millions of people with a stroke of a pen. Is that not the most criminal thing imaginable? Taiwan's decade-long ban on the Japanese food imports from area affected by the 2011 nuclear disaster. It's multiple nuclear reactors melting down. They just called it a disaster. Will be the key agenda, because Taiwan won't import food from a nuclear wasteland. And if they want to join a trade organization to get something cheap, they got to poison everybody, every man, woman, and child in the country with endless radioactive food from the nuclear meltdown sites. Try making that up. That they're harvesting food, let alone growing it, right alongside of bags. Like, this is absurd. You're talking about, now the new number is 60 million one-ton bags that they picked up. So 60 million one-ton bags is 10 rows of traffic of trucks, bumper to bumper, right around the planet with 1 ton of Fukushima radiation in the back of each pickup truck. Because that's what the pickup trucks can handle, right? 1 tons?
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence.
So that's not counting all the other prefectures. These are all, the food was banned from all these prefectures in 55 countries, not just Fukushima. And so getting it from ground zero is stupid. Why would you want to get food from the ground zero nuclear wasteland? What's the point of that? Why grow it there? Why not grow it somewhere else? Why take the chance with everybody's life? Why do something like that? That's the nuclear industry. It shows you the nuclear industry has this bizarre agenda. So when you see the poll of should they stop growing food by farms, somebody voted no, you shouldn't stop growing food in a nuclear wasteland. Well, that's pro-nuclear. That's some lunatic in the pro-nuclear industry. I'll show you, before the show started, well, Google has filters. But this was a couple of hours ago. I had 5 thumbs up and 6 thumbs down. Their filter captured it and they took away 5 of those thumbs down. But why give me 5 thumbs down before the show even starts, right? That's craziness. So 5 thumbs up and 6 thumbs down before the show even starts. And the spam filter caught that and took away 5 of them. But what that does is that sends my video to a different server, which doesn't go out to the population quite as readily. I'm censored anyway, obviously. Both the Japanese public, you think the public wants food from the nuclear waste town? And private sectors, like first off, send that food to Taiwan, to the nuclear universities. Go ask the people that own that business how safe nuclear is. And if you think I'm wrong, go down to Japan and write on 60 million bags, 1-ton bags, that Dana is wrong. Go down to Japan and write, Dana is wrong. Shoot a video. I'll watch it. Other products to Taiwan and other. Now, Taiwan, of course, had 2,000 nuclear students that were ordered to go online for several years after the meltdown started, immediately rather, and continued for several years, and spammed the internet with propaganda. 2,000 nuclear students from Taiwan. Without the blessing of the government, by the way, through just the university itself. Some of the issues likely to be discussed in future bilateral talks on lifting the ban include specifying what kind of food from a nuclear wasteland you will take to your country, or we're not going to let you join our Trans-Pacific Trade Pact. That's called extortion and murder. Murder by poison. We had a poll last night, should it be illegal to poison people with radiation? And we had 93% of the people, not 100 for some reason, but 93% of the people thinks it should be illegal to poison people. Is that a surprise to anybody? What government unit will be responsible for inspecting the imported products? You're going to have the same nuclear industry that spammed the internet for several years, inspect the food that's coming in? Because guess who's the only people that are qualified to do it is those same entities that spammed the internet, that actually went on a hunger strike a couple of years ago in order to get a referendum to try to get the people who didn't know any better to vote to let radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland come into the country. 78% voted against it. But they actually went on a hunger strike to get it on the ballot, to have a referendum statewide. Whether to lift the ban will be decided based solely on scientific evidence. This is ludicrous. You don't eat anything from the nuclear wasteland. This is not rocket science. This is common sense. You can't grow food there without it being fission products, hot particles from a nuclear meltdown that will trigger incredible illnesses and diseases. And not only that, the dose a child eats is infinitely worse for the child than it is for an adult. Adding that the government will only allow the imports as long as they are scientifically proven to be safe to eat from a nuclear wasteland. You can't get anything safe from 14 prefectures. It's still melting down, morons. This is obvious. At some point we're going to stop. I'm going to go crap, we dug a big pit, nobody can get out of the hole now. Chiba, these are all the prefectures, look, that were banned. There they are again, I put them on a map for you. Not them, but me. I put them on a map, because if they make a map that looks like that, then you might get it, see? They're not going to publish a map like that. What they do is they'll tell you the names. There's actually 14 of them. 60 million bags at a 3% of the land on top of that. Further tightens restrictions in 2015. Drawn criticism from the Japanese government for banning food from a nuclear wasteland. So that's not a government. That's evilness. As pure as it gets evilness. And they had to tighten restrictions in 2015 when it found products from the banned prefectures were discovered on stores' shelves in Taiwan. They'll ship it anywhere. Japan's insane. The nuclear industry, I should say, is insane. Because it's the nuclear industry that's doing this. It's not Japan. There's this bizarre death cult known as nuclear. How many votes we got? We got 24 votes, 96%. Let's get through it here. And they say Australia and Singapore are not expected to be challenging Japan since Taiwan has no major trade disputes with those two countries. So should we ban food, and should we just close the farms that are growing food around nuclear power plants? Because almost every single nuclear power plant is set up in a farming, normally a farming exclusive only. You won't find nothing else there, maybe a nuclear power plant. You're not going to find coal plants or oil plants or gas plants in farming land. You're going to find nuclear power plants. So there's a lot of pressure, isn't it, showing up in the media. Ban on Japanese food imports will be key topic in the talks. It's called blackmail on top of that. But really, you want a handful of politicians to sign a piece of paper to allow Japan to poison everybody indiscriminately in the country. Why is Japan growing food in a nuclear wasteland? I shouldn't say that. Why is the nuclear industry growing food in a nuclear wasteland? Like the International Atomic Energy Agency and UNSCLEAR and IRPA and the IPCC and the rest of them, if they think I'm wrong, go down there and mark on the bags, Dana is wrong, on every one of those bags. And at some point in the near future, you're going to go, maybe Dana's right. It's just common sense, by the way. You know, if this was to go pick your own food farm here, they're going to give you a basket, and they're going out there and pick your food, and you're like, what's in all those bags? And they're, it's just radiation from a nuclear meltdown. They're in the bag. It's not going to hurt you. And you'll be like, I forgot my wallet. I got to go. Taiwan's decades-long ban you should ban Japan for at least 1,000 years or 10,000 years, I should say. Don't buy anything from disgusting, despicable, coward nuclear industry in Japan and places like this here. The government needs to deal with this ban of imports of agricultural and food products from 5 prefectures. It's 14 prefectures that they have bans on, but you should ban the entire country. The whole country was covered. It still is. And just to make matters worse, they grinded up the radioactive debris around the nuclear power plant and took it to other prefectures far, far away and burned it in the incinerators. Yeah? I'm not kidding you. They're talking about billions of tons they done that. It's hard to make it up, I know. Hollywood couldn't have made this up pre-Fukushima if you wanted to. Nuclear. Food products from 5 they're not prefectures, they're nuclear wastelands. The Japanese government said it would not make the issue resolution a condition for its support of Taipei's bid to join a comprehensive and progressive agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but that's exactly what they're doing, right? Taipei faces tension in ties with Tokyo after Taiwan passes political referendum. Remember that story? A political referendum to maintain the food ban. Political referendum. This was a couple of years ago. No, they found all kinds of radiation in the food. Not only that, it's grown in a nuclear wasteland, stupid. Horrific scum, I should say. What's wrong with these people? Pro-nuke anti-Fukushima food referendum. Anti-Fukushima food referendum. Anti-poisoning referendum. It's hard to imagine they're having a referendum about whether to import food from a nuclear wasteland or not. 78% said, no, for goodness sakes, you're wasting my time. Damaged. They're calling the building damaged. Damaged. They're damaged. Their children are damaged. Morons. Well, they're not just murderers. Nuclear industry, nothing but murderers. There's no common sense. And anywhere you go in the nuclear industry, you won't see a shred of common sense. Do you agree the government should maintain the prohibition of agricultural import and food from areas affected by the nuclear meltdown? They don't even call it that. Fukushima March 11th disaster. They don't even give it they don't even give it the credibility that it deserves. They don't even call it a nuclear meltdown. Could you possibly be more vague? Do you agree the government should maintain the prohibition of agricultural products and food from an area affected by 2011? Not even 2011, March 11th. Specifically those from Fukushima proper and the four surrounding districts and cities. And Chiba. You even got Chiba. Chiba is 20 kilometers away from Tokyo. I showed you earlier, Tokyo was buried in radiation. The whole northern prefecture was brutalized. It still is. Still hemorrhaging editor. Anyway, let's get her rolling here. So, again, just to remind you, there's a poll here tonight. Poll. I got me a poll. Dun, 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 dun. Should we close all farms around nuclear power plants and mixed oxide fuel facilities and nuclear dumps and nuclear reprocessing sites? Common sense says yes. Then the next question is, what? They got farms around a nuclear plant? Yeah. Hey, I didn't put them there. Don't yell at me. This is a depiction of a future nuclear plant surrounded by farms. We see that all the time, don't we? Every time we see a nuclear plant or a dump, it's in farmland, prime farmland. Former scum, degenerate, coward, monster, Xeon Light with environmental progress backing her up. Environmental progress actually created her, right? She started up her own little monster company funded by Michael Schellenberg's Environmental Progress, which is a lobbyist for the nuclear industry. If the world embraced nuclear energy decades ago, there'd be no climate change. This is just... What's wrong with that person? And I covered that extensively last night, right? But that's why this is radioactive fallout from Japan. This is only the venting, by the way. This is not the actual nuclear meltdown inventories. Or the fuel pools that were at the top of the building detonated, caught fire, and blew up and caught fire. No, not at all. No, this is just venting. This is models from different governments I'm going to show you. And it's pulsing, invisible snowstorm covering the entire planet, pulsing energy every second, forever. Does that sound like global warming to you? It sounds like global warming to me. This is the plume. That's the Atlantic, Pacific over there. Now it's hitting the continent in North America. Now it's covering the Atlantic Ocean in Europe. And it just never stops. The model stops there, but it still keeps going. Gets thicker and thicker. Still, even today, still coming out of there heavily. So it's energy. It's saturated all the plants, all the ecosystems, all the oceans, all the atmospheres. and it's still coming out. They're not trying to stop it. They're trying to stop me telling you. They're trying to stop the leaks of us, not Fukushima. So they put an incredible amount of energy into hiding it, and then they got these despicable monsters that they use to try to bludgeon those who are not aware. I'll show you how it works. April the 6th, 2011, not even a month after, Fukushima reactor leak plugged with liquid glass. Well, what's that, Dana? They said they plugged it with a mixture of sawdust and newspaper. Plugged what, Dana? Plugged 290-foot buildings, what's left of them. So they allegedly, 3 weeks later, they had this all plugged with sawdust and newspaper. Try wrapping your mind around that for a while. The Pacific Coalition Against Nuclear Weapons and Nuclear Testing condemns Australia's policy for abandoning the Pacific Nuclear Free Pact. It did too, right? That's what Australia now is going to have a nuclear sub. And it'll end up doing that because Australia's government and military are incredibly incompetent, bordering on childlike. Australia needs to be put on notice by the Pacific Island Forum's the leaders over abandoning its commitment under the South Pacific Nuclear Free Accord. There's calls in Australia again for a royal commission in the nuclear power. Australia, this is Sky News. That conversation around Australia net zero, you hear that word all the time in the last couple of days. Future continues. There are calls nuclear energy could be the answer. Yeah, it takes 20 years to build it. And then you're going to poison everybody. You got to find proper farmland to build it in the first place. I guess Australia got lots of farmland. One former state governor is calling for a single one, and that's worthy now of all the media regurgitating that narrative. And then World Nuclear News. It's pretty hard to get any eviler than World Nuclear News. They're a nuclear lobbyist too. They never put their names on a single story on top of that. Georgia Power revisits Vogtle in-service dates. That's a very, very, very roundabout way of saying they're going to be behind schedule again. Right? That's what they're saying. And instead of saying Georgia Power Reactor won't come online for another 6 months after the original date we announced, because it's a decade behind already. They used a lobbyist to come out with a headline that makes no sense to the average person that reads it. I'm not going to read that. That's stupid. What they're saying is they're a long way, very long way from completing that reactor a decade later than it should be. Do France's plan for small nuclear reactors have a hidden agenda? Like France radiated the entire population of the French Polynesians and the Nigerians and the Algerians, and they caused a civil war in Niger for 6 years straight, destroyed millions of families, destroyed all the infrastructure in the country so they can get cheap uranium and call themselves carbon free. And they still occupy Niger today, right? They ran it dry. They ran it right into the ground, actually. A French law says the country will have to reduce sheer nuclear energy from the 70%, the highest in the world, to 50% in 2035. An actual law. They'll change the law if you feel like it, right? This type of energy is stable and predictable, he says, unlike certain renewables like wind energy. And existing nuclear power plants hardly produce any CO2. Well, they boil 1 million gallons a minute of water into the environment. That's CO2 city. And that each glass of water, typically a glass of water, would have 1 billion creatures in it. And 75 to 100 million of them would be the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. Every minute, so there's 16 million glasses, 16 million glasses per minute times a billion creatures. So 16 million times a billion creatures per minute are boiled away. You're going to call that carbon-free. But a nuclear power plant needs 2 oil, gas, or coal plants dedicated to run the entire site, every inch of that site. And these plants are dedicated only to that site. And they usually use coal plants because they're the cheapest, right? Michael Snyder says nuclear is just hot air and small modular reactors. He thinks nuclear energy is inefficient in the fight against the climate emergency, too expensive, too slow. So last year, more than 250 gigawatts of renewable energies, which is equal to 300 nuclear power plants, came online. But only 0.4 gigawatts of nuclear capacity came online. So there was over 300 nuclear power plants worth of renewables in 2020 were up and running, producing energy. There's only 440 plants, and only 414 of them are basically operating. Quite a lot of them are down on downtime for a lot of the year. Nuclear power has become irrelevant. And Snyder writes the worldwide synopsis for nuclear each year. He's very famous. Nuclear power plants only appear to be more reliable than renewables. France's nuclear reactors on average had to be switched off during 1/3 of the time in 2020, mostly due to maintenance because they're very old plants on top of that. And also, as they now have been running for a long time, on an average for more than 35 years, which was their lifespan because of the neutron bombardment of the metal. It was called a Wigner effect, where it made the metal extremely unstable. It takes ages to build up new nuclear power plants. And then France is trying to develop the EPRs, the third generation pressurized water reactor design. After 35 years, there's still no EPR in Europe up and running. 35 years later, they started that after Chernobyl, right? France is constructing a plant in Flameville. Will exceed $11 billion instead of the francs, instead of the original 3.3 billion euros, is it? And the EPR is only scheduled to be completed next year, which is 10 years later than initially intended. So who knows what will go wrong between now and then on top of that. It's always next year with a nuclear power plant, isn't it? Nevertheless, President Macron could soon announce plans to build 6 additional EPRs in France, despite the fact that is over 3 times the cost, which is significant monies, and then it's a decade behind schedule. Because the nuclear industry is a very powerful industry. And if the president don't say stuff like that, he's not going to get any funding for a re-election. I don't really see why you would spend money on a small modular reactors, especially as you don't know if they will even work or not. He's got it together, haven't he? Without civil nuclear power, no military nuclear power. And without military nuclear power, there's no civil nuclear power. The president has said, praising a sector that employs 220,000 people. 220,000 people in France. This is high wages. A lot more than that, obviously. There's the high wages. So 220,000 at 120,000 a head is $26 billion. $26 billion. That's a lot of money. That's all the freebies. That's all the days off. That's all the benefits, etc., right? So the question tonight is a very simple question. It's a question that we've asked before, maybe, but we're asking again: should we close all farms around nuclear power plants and mixed oxide fuel nuclear fuel reprocessing facilities? We got 93% says yes out of 27 votes, but a bizarre death cult of 7% saying that we shouldn't stop growing food around the nuclear wastelands. Because that's what nuclear is. Should we stop growing food where it's going to be sucking up all kinds of radiation? Maybe I should have worded it that way. Who knows? But why are all the nuclear power plants built in farm countries? What was the point of all that? Again, you see the nuclear industry getting a toehold into countries. Indonesia's path to net zero CO2 includes a nuclear plant. Their path to net, like, you can't call nuclear carbon free. It's absurd. It uses all the precious metals on the bloody planet and it radiates it, and you can't recycle any of it. Even though they do recycle a lot of the radioactive stuff. They just raised the limits and said, well, that's acceptable. It's below the limits. And their limits is always just gamma emitters, never the alpha, betas, the neutrons. They only do one. They don't do the others. It's evilness. It's just pure evilness, every facet of the bloody industry. In 2045, they expect to have their... So we still have time to make them change their mind. Net zero needs nuclear. Net zero. A new campaign in Canada, supported by the degenerate scum called Bruce Power and the rest of the degenerates like Ontario Power Generation, have one simple scam. There is no path to net zero without mass genocide nuclear. Clean nuclear power is crucial to fighting climate change. My God. See, that's the worst thing about what I do. I got to see those words all day. Economies around the world have less than 30 years to cut overall carbon emissions to net zero. And so this is a big scam to prop up nuclear, but it backfired. There's 260 gigawatts of renewables last year, which is equal to 300 nuclear power plants. Nuclear is obsolete, is right. To meet the crucial climate change objective. And so Bruce Power is, every time we cover a story about Bruce Power, it's climate change, over and over and over and over and over. The whole bloody story will be, meet climate change objective. Canada and countries will need to harness all clean energy solution, including nuclear power. It'll be critical in providing base loads, particularly in areas where renewables face intermittency issues. You can have pumped hydro to conquer that, and you can have compressed air storage. Net zero needs nuclear. And disgusting. Oh, so the next month in Glasgow, COP26, which is United Nations created by the nuclear industry in the first place, will take up the net zero challenge. So what they're basically doing is they're setting the stage for that so-called summit of organized crime they're going to have down there. And then that'll be the catalyst. They'll use that now, all the build-up to it, right? All the propaganda, just everything's propaganda all the way, right? Last week and all the way up until November 10th. And then every day it'll be nightmarish. It'll be nightmarish. I might even take a week off just to get away from it. Of the net zero nuclear I'm joking, of course, because I thrive on that stuff when they have these big moments. Because you get all the lawyers out. It's like because I don't watch TV, it's like the Grammys or something. That's what the Glasgow COP26 is. It's the Grammys for the nuclear industry. Even though they're claiming to be rejected, I can't see how that works. The importance and profile of nuclear power in the lead up to these discussions, one simple message: there is no path to net zero without dirty nuclear. While the campaign is launching today, which I think was yesterday, with 2 signatories in Bruce Power and OPG, in the weeks ahead, the campaign will look to add organizations that support the message. that there is no path to net zero without dirty nuclear. And gram for gram, nuclear fuel contains 1 million times more energy than fossil fuel. Like, that's the oldest scam in the world, isn't it? They got to dig up mountains to get their gram. I can't remember how many tons they got to go through to get their gram of uranium for the reactor. It's absurd. That's really something, man. Net zero. I'll give you a rough idea of what I mean by that. In order to get their gram of uranium that they're talking about, I'll show you what we're talking about. Just bear with me. To get their almighty gram. The lunatics. Here we go, we're almost done. To get their gram. So to get the gram, they got to dig up mountains. They got to dig up mountains with massive equipment to get that gram they're talking about. Then they have these chemical ponds. These are chemicals. And they evaporate or leach into the environment or evaporate. They don't get stored on a dump site. They're evaporated. Every time it rains, it overflows. They have to put that, to get the gram, the finished product from the mines, have to go through this incredible carbon-intensive process. Once they get to that stage, and they abandon thousands and thousands of these mines, by the way, and you can't drink the water at all of these communities to get their gram. In order to get their hands on the gram, they polluted the earth, they destroyed endless communities. They got millions of children with permanent disabilities. They poisoned the ocean. They used the destitute and the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language, for slave labor and throw them away like paper towels. They wrecked the entire ecosystem in order to get their gram that they're talking about. So they can say that 1 gram is equal to 1 million times more energy than fossil fuel. It's a complete, endless Ponzi scheme. They're completely immune to reality. Clean baseload. Without emitting any greenhouse gases. Clean. Look at the brainwashing. Air quality improves significantly. All of these are the opposite of what it does, by the way. Reducing respiratory illnesses. Reducing respiratory illnesses. How dare you say that? Fukushima radioactive fallout has covered the entire planet in fission products. All the species, all the insects, all the birds, all the animals, all the bacteria, all the flora, all the fauna, all the humans, all the fresh drinking water poisoned permanently for millions of years. Not only that, it's pulsing energy every second, heating up the planet at an unprecedented rate in the last decade. And by results, we're having these incredible storms of over 200 mile per hour winds. We don't have any infrastructures, by the way, that are built to handle 200 mile per hour winds. Look at the brainwashing. Net zero, net zero, net zero, net zero. Post-carbon. Post is you and me, by the way. Post you and me. Climate change. Global climate change. Global. They got over 4,200 employees. They got kids going to universities. They got soccer and football games to attend to. You got to keep nuclear. Do it for the football kids team. Protecting the... like, how dare you say that nuclear protects the environment? You despicable sack of... You coward, you, to say something like that. And Lightbridge fuel moves closer to radiation testing. The Department of Energy paid for it all. The Idaho National Laboratories. Well, one of the biggest aquifers on the planet, they got that poisoned permanently. Freshwater aquifers. Their legacy is the genocide machine. It's a perpetual misery machine. There is a perpetual machine. It's called nuclear. It's a perpetual misery machine. U.S. Testing capabilities are used by the military. Why would you make anything for the military? Why would you enable something like that? Oh, sponge, a zirconian sponge demand to rise on nuclear construction. Demand for zirconian, which is, they use that to coat the rods. It's very volatile too. If it's exposed to air, it detonates. Well, it burns very, very hot, I should say. Hot enough to cause a nuclear meltdown. Like, literally the stupidest thing you can do is coat lethal fuel with something that's going to burn if it's exposed to the environment. Literally the stupidest thing imaginable in order to make it work. And of course, World Nuclear Association. They hate all the species. If you're looking for something that meets the definition of evil, World Nuclear Association. They don't have a single person there with a personality either. Not one. Not a single person there. You'll cross the street if you've seen them walking on the same side of the road as you coming towards you. You don't know who they are, but you're not staying there. That person looks pretty weird, man. Has brought online 24 gigawatts of nuclear capacity since the start of the 13th five-year plan from 2006. 24.8 gigawatts. But solar and wind and renewables last year in 12 months was 260 gigawatts. Nuclear is despicable. It needs to disappear. Global nuclear capacity sits at about 394 gigawatts worldwide, and we brought on 260 gigawatts last year of renewables. GovEx uranium is ready to help meet the nuclear fuel supply gap. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, climate change. Can't they write an original sentence? They don't have anybody to write for them either. They have the worst writers. The nuclear industry truly has the worst writers. In order to combat the effects of climate change. UN's climate change. Like lunatics. Actual lunatics, eh? Paris Accord. Climate Accord. Which was designed to promote nuclear. Reducing greenhouse gases emissions and climate change. Reducing global greenhouse gas. These are lunatics. This was the narrative that came up at the Paris Climate Accord, right? We're going to go out there. We're going to have all the media, all the universities, all the government agencies, all the regulators, because we've captured them all, regurgitate this narrative. Everywhere you go on the planet, I want to hear climate change, and nuclear is the solution. And we'll just hammer everybody with it for the next decades. That's what they're doing, right? 100% is what we're seeing anyway. Consider building a nuclear power fleet as you work to mitigate the effects of climate change. Climate change is caused by Fukushima radioactive fallout, but global warming in general is caused by all the nuclear weapons testing. That's right. It's absurd. We will cover that in a little tiny bit here. Every time you see the World Nuclear Association, that's a lobbyist. They'll cut your baby's throat to get the candy this Halloween. That's how they're too stupid to steal it from the baby. Their solution is Well, let's cut the baby's throat that can't resist. We'll steal a candy. You're like, well, why don't you just steal a candy because you're a scumbag? Yeah, but the baby might see me and tell somebody, Dana. Oh, okay. That's the nuclear industry's reasoning. That's how they see things, right? Well, we better kill him. And he might tell somebody. And chop him up in little bits and throw him over a cliff. Because they always build nuclear power plants around cliffs, right? So they can get rid of the bodies. Uranium-308, just a yellow cake. Prices were pushed to a 9-year high in September when Sprout Physical Trust here in Canada, this was a Ponzi scheme, added 1.25 million pounds of uranium yellow cake to its holding in one day. Artificially inflated stocks, and then people who didn't know any better were convinced that the stocks were rising buy. Then they sold the shares that they bought last year or the year before for dollars per stock for $10, $12, $20 a stock. So what's going on? It's been going on for 10 years. I've been covering it straight now for 10 years. The stock markets, they come in these spurts every 6, 8, 10 weeks. They'll run another scam, artificially inflate stocks for a couple of days. Buy, especially like the Globe and Mail out in Vancouver. They're disgusting. It's disgusting what they're doing. It's disgusting. Nuclear container ship back to St. Petersburg after only 2 months in the Arctic. That's the same ship that broke its prop there last year. There's a lot of big drama over that for about a week and a half. A nuclear ship, they'll probably dump the reactor up in the Arctic with the rest of the reactors. After only 2 months in the Arctic, Russia's nuclear power never gave no reason, just bailed out. After a year in the south, why the ship now sailed south again is unknown. In September, it spent a long time at anchor outside of Novaya Zembla, where they'd done all the nuclear testing and done a lot of nuclear dumping, by the way, in a top-secret Russians area test site. By the way, the ship can be tracked via its AIS system, so you don't run into it in the fog. Nuclear ship out there can be tracked wherever he goes with your app on your cell phone. That's the nuclear industry for you. And so last year, it limped back. It had to get tugboats to steer it. But it got back to the shipyard and spent almost a year at the shipyard because it broke a prop, a propeller blade. If you break a propeller blade, you don't have to spend a year in the shipyard, okay? There's something else going on there they're not telling us. Russia scientists would probably ejected the reactor core, and that's why they were slow making it home, right? Russia's scientists advanced in radiation modeling. Russia. Where they have checkpoints, they steal your socks and your sunglasses, Russia. And even worse, Rosatom scientists, that's the government, right? Rosatom, that's their actual government, have developed a new highly accurate digital modeling of the public impacts of radiation releases. And so the idea was that they can build anything they want now. They got the study and there will be no radiation can harm you. That's what they're doing. That's what that's all about, eh? Well, first off, you can't contain radiation at a nuclear plant. They got to vent it all. And so when they vent it, it's going to end up outside. It's not going to land inside the gate. That's why they got the big high stacks. So it don't land inside the gate, by the way. They've done all kinds of studies. And they know that radiation sucks up, or plants suck up radiation. Thereby, if you eat the grapes, you're going to be poisoned. If you eat the fruit or anything grown there, you're going to be poisoned. If you eat the strawberries, you're going to be poisoned. If you eat wheat, you're going to be poisoned. By the way, irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. You haven't got to eat it all year. You just got to eat it a few times. And so why would you have nuclear power plants surrounded by farms when you know even tomato plants are going to suck up the radiation? All plants will suck up radiation. Fruit plants, it doesn't matter. So why are nuclear power plants? This is why we got a poll tonight, by the way. The poll is, should we close all farms around nuclear power plants and max reprocessing nuclear fuel plants and dumps and stuff like that? 94% of 36 votes says yes, and 6% says no, let's poison them all. Accumulation of radionuclides by plants. So why build a plant in a farm country? So potatoes, we know, all these plants, all these studies I'm showing you is proof they know that the plants and the farms are going to suck up the radiation. That's all I'm showing you. So when you see all of these studies and you see pictures of farms everywhere, you can do the math. Yeah? You can do the math, can't you? You can say, well, that can't be good. Spain is on track to phase out nuclear power, which is awesome because they know they don't want to poison everybody. That's why Germany walked away. But Germany said, well, we better get out of it. We better get out of it because they're poisoning us. So a Swedish company wins a record order from UK for nuclear equipment, which kind of means the UK might go ahead and start building finishing one of those plants. Sweden has announced a record order to supply nuclear tubes and pipes for UK Hinkley Point. Said it will supply nuclear tubes and pipes in 29 dimensions. And so look at it's got to be all these criteria with low carbon content. Only the best of the best for nuclear, baby. Require a high degree of cleanliness to meet the nuclear design codes. No matter what it is, you got to have the best of the best for these degenerate genocide nuclear power plants. With firm controls on instructions and procedures and regular on-site third-party inspections during the manufacturing. And they'll deliver 60 million meters of nuclear fuel tubes, which will instantly become permanently radioactive. So you're basically 60 million meters is 1.45 trips, so a full trip around the planet and 0.4, almost 50% around the planet again of radioactive pipes you can't get rid of anywhere. That's nuclear industry for you. Only the best of the best, right? It needs to meet all the inspections, all kinds of criterias. A Hinkley Point. Oh my goodness. They're hard cases, eh? Murder them all. That's the nuclear code. Let's murder them all. Nuclear renaissance could soon begin. I'm like, this is a small modular reactor pipe dream again. Why would you want to build something? Why would you put a stake in small modular reactors when they don't even exist? Yeah, we're going to jimmy one together in the next 10 years, Dana. Parts left over from all the other failed plants. And now you got small modular reactors, have we? See, there's a big difference between having one up and running in 10 years than having a factory producing them. Do you know how long, even with a factory, is going to take to produce each one of them? It's so, all of this rhetoric is so you don't come up with solutions for renewables, right? So you don't come up with storage and stuff like that. Is to keep you in the hook of this pipe dream. Oh, no, you don't need to. Nuclear small modular reactor is going to be right around the corner, Dana. But it's meant, right, to disarm you, disenfranchise you from doing something moral and ethical for the planet, yourself, and the future generations and the species. Very few accidents have ever taken place in nuclear plants. They're constant releases from the fuel pool. It's one continuous accident all day long, 24 hours a day. The fuel pools are full of reactor cores splitting the atom. The site, because they don't have a repository on purpose anywhere on the planet, all the fuel we produce is open to the environment or vented into the environment. All the fuel, all the material is still splitting the atom. Everything that goes through a reactor will split the atom for millions and millions of years, which means it's hemorrhaging radiation into the environment, into your communities, into all those farmers' fields. I'm not like producing all this material because I'm bored. Excuse me. My throat almost gave out on me that time. Solar and wind cannot provide power 24 hours a day, but they can. You can do it with pumped hydro storage or compressed air storage if you haven't got access, or a boat. And you can also have, thermal power from the earth. You can have tidal power. There's so many ways to, if you had a contest in 1,000 universities, you come up with some great solutions immediately. Means that small modular reactors can be factory built and then transported via rails or ships. They don't even exist. Like, you're wasting precious time and resources on pipe dreams. It's just no different than saying, oh, well, you're going to have fusion power, Dana, or they're going to have power from a satellite in the sky, Dana. It's going to laser beam the power down to Earth, Dana. They're going to have it on the moon, and they're going to run a big wire down to Earth, Dana. They're going to power, and everybody's going to get a little device, and they got to sit there like this for 3 hours a day, and they got enough power to power their house, Dana. Anything but come up with solutions. Anything. They do anything but come up with an actual solution. Cost as low as $3 billion. So if you need 12, right? As opposed to over $10 billion for a traditional reactor. So as low as, think about what they're saying there, cost as low as $3 billion. And you need 12 of them to have the same power as the big ones. So they need 10. And you get each one for $3 billion, which they admit is really low if they can pull that off. That's $30 billion for the same plant that costs $10 billion. The whole industry is a lunatic. And first off, they can't come in on budget. They cannot. It's impossible for this industry to come in on budget. If you gave them $5, you gave them a $100 bill, and you said, go over to the donut shop and get me 5 donuts. And they come back, they have $6 left, because that's how the nuclear industry works. They don't know how to manage anything. They can't, right? There's no one in the industry that I can find is actually functional. The passive safety features used by small modular reactors that don't exist, by the way, are still susceptible to accidents like hydrogen explosions. So they may up requiring backup safety mechanisms that could dramatically increase their production costs, Dana. So you're going from low, the lowest number is $3 billion. Small. But what was the headline, though? The headline says, nuclear renaissance could begin soon. And they're like, cuckoo. Every facet of the narrative is cuckoo. IAEA has issued its first its first security measure, security, sabotage. I missed it, did I? IAEA issues guidance on nuclear cybersecurity. Their first one. Security. It's first. And they're doing it because they think terrorists now are going to go attack nuclear power plants or steal the spent fuel pool. Like, do you know how long it takes to load the spent fuel pool into a cask for transportation? And these casks are like 50,000 pounds on their own. You need special cranes. It takes about 4 days for them to transfer the fuel, but the terrorists are going to walk in and what? Put them in their pocket? But they get $1 billion each year to spend on security, as long as you keep the fear-mongering going straight, like sabotage. Sabotage. So we got a poll tonight. Be there, be square. We got 38 votes. Should we close all farms around nuclear power plants? I don't know. What does everybody think? Should we close all the farms around nuclear power plants? Can you imagine how many people this power plant poisoned in its lifetime? And that one, and this one. How many they poison each year? Try wrapping your mind around it. The UK net zero strategy put nuclear as a low priority. Low priority. Yeah, but if you do build it, and if they do, they're going to, like Hinkley Point, they're going to have it surrounded by farms. This is a depiction of it. It's UK net zero strategy. Puts nuclear as a low priority. Don't worry, nuclear, you'll get your money. Boris Johnson is not going to put that peach can down from Fukushima anytime soon. Net zero, here we go again. Low carbon capture. One of the key policies listed there is to secure a final investment decision on a large-scale nuclear plant by the end of Parliament. So by the end of Parliament, they want the money for a large nuclear power plant. China backs no first-use nuclear policy, calls on nations to cut warheads stockpiles. You can't use it. Just make dummy nuclear weapons and pretend you got them. It's not like you're going to use them. You can't use them. It's a lose-lose. It's a lose-lose scenario. Marks the 50th anniversary of Beijing being awarded a UN seat. A UN seat. A corporation created by the nuclear industry. That's what United Nations is. And they've taken over the sovereignty of most people's countries, as evident with the COVID scam, which is the cover-up for Fukushima radioactive fallout. Bear in mind that a nuclear war cannot be won. They know that, right? That's the point of it. Keep you in that fear-mongering mode. And the bigger the fear-mongering going on, the more money they can steal from the treasury, right? Is it time to reassess nuclear energy? No. Is it time that you go to see a psychiatrist? Yes. Why do they always show the fake plumes coming out of these? These are always photoshopped in, eh? Because there's tons of real. It's easy to do the real ones. Is it time to just take the picture? Is it time to reassess nuclear energy? No. Development of renewable energy sources like solar and wind energy in recent decades, one of the most important measures taken by Norway and Europe to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from electricity producers. But unfortunately, only when the weather is right. So the poll tonight, we got 38 votes, 96% saying we should close farms around nuclear power plants. Send them to Fukushima. If you want a job, lots of jobs in Fukushima. Close all the nuclear power plants, send everybody to Fukushima. That's just kind of interesting thing too. We don't see nuclear plant employees from all the nuclear plants worldwide going to Fukushima and volunteering to work there. It is time to reassess nuclear energy. No. But are largely overlooked. Again, they talk about no greenhouse gas emissions. So this all stemmed from the Paris Climate Accord a couple of years back, and all the media worldwide regurgitates the exact same words. And sometimes you assume it's all written by the same person. That's Reactor 3 and 4 in the background. So that's a really old picture, and the buildings are completely destroyed. There's nothing left of them. These were 190-foot buildings. And the white roof down there is Reactor 1. It took us forever to figure out which reactors were which. You could never had nobody to tell you what the reactors were. That was one of the big problems I seen with people. Everybody trying to figure out what reactor was what originally. Like originally being the first couple of years. There was nobody out there saying, this is Reactor 1, that's Reactor 2, that's Reactor 3, and that's Reactor 4. Nobody on the entire planet. Spent fuel is in a uncontained facility in a pool of special water to stop criticality, but still they're splitting the atoms. The atoms are boiling off the pools all day long. So each liter is trillions of fission atoms. So the atoms are split and they normally boil water, right, in the reactor because they're pressurized to 900 psi. But then you take them out of the reactor and release all the radiation into the environment. Of course, that's why they bring in 1,000 people to do the fuel change because they don't want their own statistically showing up with illnesses. And then the fuel pools, because they don't have a repository anywhere in the planet, they store all their fuel, hot fuel, in the pools for decades. And that's boiling off the pools all day and all night, about 120,000 liters in all 440 pools worldwide that we know about, right? And that's, so instead of splitting the atom for 1 million homes, it's still splitting the atom for 1 million homes, but it's not producing power. It's vented up the stacks and into the farmers' fields. And it pulses energy every second, forever and ever and ever. If it gets in you, it's pulsing energy every second. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And you have a decreased end permanently of red blood cells carrying nutrition and oxygen throughout your body. Sounds like a party, right? After a few years in the reactor, it's a given that the fuel turns into waste. It's usually about 16 months. Or more correctly, partly used fuel. No, they took it out of the reactor because it's fragile, it's very volatile. Now it's gone through a chain reaction. And they said, which could be one day used in other power plants, which is illegal in Canada and the United States. It's called mixed oxide fuel. They do that because they don't have the storage. So they reclaim the hot particles, put it in a special modified reactor, and basically burn it and release the hot particles into the environment during the cycle, so they don't have to store it for 1 million years. Just let it float around and poison everybody and all the creatures and insects and birds and mammals, everything cool. That's what they do. They kill everything cool. Unlike greenhouse gases from fossil energies, which are released directly into the atmosphere. That's what nuclear needs 2 cold gas or oil plants constantly hemorrhaging into the air just to run. Their reactors, fuel pools rather, are constantly releasing radiation The reactors are also releasing radiation through the torus, right? They burp it down there. The whole industry, and they also have pipes that run a mile out into the ocean. We're always dumping radioactive material into the oceans. They're disgusting. There's no checks and balances, and there's nobody challenging them properly. So we decided, not we being me and you, I decided to run an educational program, and hopefully the population would wake up and start having a debate. Because you got to give people a real narrative to go out and thump these goons with. These are not goons, these are cowards, by the way. Nuclear industry and them are cowards. They're the furthest thing from a goon. Unlike greenhouse gases from fossil energy, which are released directly into the atmosphere, which is exactly what nuclear does all day, 24 hours a day. And so does all their fuel that's venting into the atmosphere for millions of years. That stuff is floating around, pulsing energy and killing species. After a few hundred years in a landfill, in landfills, how dare you call this? A few hundred meters underground, where they will remain forever. The waste is just as dangerous as lead. So whoever wrote that should be tarred and feathered. And we put all the spent fuel from the U.S. nuclear power plant, which have had such production since the 50s, on a football field, the stack size would not be higher than 4 meters. Well, first off, you can't put fuel out in the open because it'll detonate. Second off, if you had 1 pound of it, a single pound of it, and everybody in America walked past that and touched it or something, everybody would die that day. You can take that to China and kill everybody. You can take it to all the species. That 1 pound, everybody on the planet got to go walk by and touch it once. Everybody dies on the planet. You can kill all the animals. You can go to another planet in the solar system and kill all the species on that planet with a single pound of it, one at a time. Or you can take 10 pounds of it and put it at a subway, for instance. Everybody who walks past it that day died that day, every day for millions of years. Not only that, if you took all that and put it out in the open, it's all still splitting the atom. We're talking about a significant amount of atoms that would make this planet uninhabitable in 20 or 30 years of direct exposures. After a few years in the reactors, given that the fuel turns into waste, this was probably written by the nuclear industry, or more correctly, partially used fuel, which could one day be. So the industry is a lunatic suggesting that you can reuse the fuel. They only do that, it's called mixed oxide fuel. They do it for La Hague in France. They do it at Sellafield, United Kingdom. They used to do it at Donneray. Of course, now it's going to take 300 years to make Donneray usable for something else. Of course, it never will be, right? Current nuclear power plants are at least as safe as wind turbines. Like, this is absurd assertions, all of them. It's stuff you would expect to hear from, say, Rod Adams or Geraldine Thomas and people like that, right? It is time to discuss nuclear energy as the most effective and sustainable tool in a serious and honest way. There's no discussions. They have controlled opposition to the nuclear industry. And it's very well scripted. Nobody deviates from the script. No drama. In a serious and honest way at the national levels. If you actually had an actual serious and honest debate on nuclear, there wouldn't be a baseball bat left on the planet. Everybody would go out and buy one, and we would exterminate the nuclear industry overnight, I bet you. If the world understood what was really going on, they would go to war immediately against the nuclear industry. There wouldn't be a pro-nuclear person left on this planet by the end of the week. Reliable and safe energy without greenhouse gas emissions is too important not to do. Again, right, we see this narrative trying to frame nuclear as Spider-Man or the Hulk or something, you know? The head of the Chernobyl reactor died. He was 85 years old. They actually sent him to a hard labor camp for 10 years because of Chernobyl melting down. So the blast, which emitted, this is their version now, emitted more than 400 times the amount of radiation into the atmosphere than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945, 76 years ago. Okay, so the Castle Bravo in the Bikini Atolls was 1,000 times more powerful, 1,000 times more radiation than the Hiroshima bomb. So when you see them say that Chernobyl was equal to 400 times, by the way, they closed 9,000 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom because of Chernobyl, 3,000 miles away. Saying that it was 200 tons at Chernobyl, it was a graphite moderator, which means it's not pure uranium, pure plutonium, like the 800-ton reactors in each of them in Japan, which were at the time the biggest in the world. But they had around 5 million pounds at the top of the buildings in 190 feet up near in what they call storage pools that don't have no containment, and that detonated and burnt continuously. And when China syndrome and whatever was left didn't burn up and go into the environment and spread around the planet, exterminating the planet in these plumes, right? Plumes covering the entire planet. And so now we see all the species die off, all the birds, all the mammals, all the animals. So Castle Bravo was 1,000 times worse, and it was the worst radiological disaster in U.S. history, not 3 Mile Island. And Santa Susana in the United States was 460 times 3 Mile Island. They hid that since 1959. But the declassified Russian footage of the largest nuclear bomb they ever tested, the TARS Bomba, is estimated to pack the equivalent of 50 million tons, which is the animosity equivalent of 3,800 Hiroshima bombs. So just a single nuclear bomb is equal to 2 countries firing 1,900 Hiroshima-sized bombs into the one spot. It's the same radioactive fallout. That's a nuclear war, yeah? It was estimated to be 3,800 times the strength of the U.S. bomb dropped on Hiroshima during World War II. So the head of Chernobyl nuclear reactor, it was sentenced to 10 years hard labor, back to that story. 400 times the amount of radiation to the atmosphere. It's a paper towel compared to Fukushima. Don't get me wrong, Chernobyl was brutal. Like, they got orphanages today full of disfigured children that have been abandoned. The nuclear industry won't even give them a TV set, won't even give them a radio, won't even give them a toy to play with. Imagine, abandoned children because of radiation, disfigured and deformed, and incredible mutations, human mutations. And the nuclear industry won't give them anything. World Health Organization, which is United Nations, cancer research arm has estimated 9,000 people would die of cancer and leukemia if Chernobyl's disaster health effects followed a similar pattern to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Scumbags, you degenerate scumbags at the World Health Organization, you cowards, you despicable cowards. They're UN, right? They're part of UN. It really is something, isn't it? That they're such cowards, they're such human trash, they're such traitors. So Chernobyl was 200 tons, yeah. So then the poll tonight, we're going to close the poll here in a few minutes, is should we close all farms around nuclear power plants? Hi, Kevin. Should we close all farms around nuclear power plants and max nuclear fuel plants? And 95% says yes, and 5% creeps from the nuclear industry says no, we shouldn't stop growing food around nuclear facilities, nuclear wastelands. Nuclear plants are hemorrhaging radiation all the time. Having a farm there is the definition of evil. It's actually, and it's on purpose, it's actually monstrous to have farms all around nuclear power plants. It's an absurd, unbelievable, hideous design. So that's the new Sizewell B in the United Kingdom. And look what they got done. They got that's a future nuclear plant surrounded by farms. Try wrapping your mind around that. I know what you're saying. No, they wouldn't do that. Well, that's what we got. So radioactive material from reactors is 2 billion times more toxic than industry poisons. So it's 2 billion times more toxic. Having farms around these facilities is a murder factory, yeah? It's a genocide machine, see? Time to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. Ambassador Murata writes to the UN Secretary General, "It is no exaggeration to say the fate of the world and Japan depends on number 4 reactor." So a single building, the fate of the world is in balance. And reactor 4 was destroyed. They covered it up, right? Weekends off at Fukushima, not one worker could be seen. No, they had steam coming out of the ground in 6 places at 10 sieverts per hour, to the point where they had to abandon the site. And so that radioactive steam will radiate everything it touches. Tokyo vice governor suggests the Fukushima draft, all of Japan must face it. Sale of foreign Geiger counters were banned, right? You had Safecast was the only one allowed to have Geiger counters down there. And these were all handmade, right? Asby Brown, the despicable traitor, sold out to everybody in Japan. Concerned half of Japan to be covered in nuclear waste. 60 and older should be prepared to die. 60 and older should be prepared to die. Because your power plant broke down. Forever. 2 more spots to be above 10 sieverts. These are lethal doses right away. Over 200 sieverts per hour. These are lethal doses from very long distances. Report radiation levels double within 20 days of decontamination by Japan. Officials admit decontamination only for reducing external exposures to radiation. We're aware of need to prevent radiation in food, but it's outside of our jurisdiction. That's the people who are decontaminating the communities. You can't decontaminate a community.
I hired employees that could only stay on the job for 3 minutes before they exceeded.
So if you're hired people that can only work for 3 minutes at a nuclear, he's talking about 3 Mile Island, him and Lake Barrett. That's lethal doses he's talking about. These were homeless people. I hired people, not scientists, not researchers, not nuclear corporations. I hired people. These are the victims of society, the immigrants that are crossing the border. Gunderson, the traitors Gunderson, move south of equator if Unit 4 fuel pool goes dry. Think about that statement. Get out of North America if Unit 4 fuel pool goes dry. There's Unit 4. That's where the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. They went dry, And he didn't, his job was to cover it up, see? This is Arnie Gunnarsson. I put him right where the fuel pool is too.
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
So if he doesn't know where the fuel pool is, who does? Yeah? Here's your loving media pretending they're at the fuel pool that don't even exist.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So Reactor 4 is to your left, and the depiction is to your right. The fuel pools are right there and over there. They don't have no repository, so those fuel pools are stuffed. This is the reactor core. It has to stay underwater to transfer the fuel into these pools. It's around 10 million pounds in the billings. They weren't really designed to do that, but they got no choice because there's no repository. But as you can see, the billing doesn't exist over there. It's just a stump left, right? Gunnarsson, move south of the equator if Unit 4 pool goes dry. Now the pool went dry, yeah? Do you get it? The pool has gone dry, baby. The pool. Get some adjustments on the floor here. He had 1 million becquerels hit the west coast per square meter of xenon-133. You had 20 million particles in another study of iodine-131 per liter of rainfall, which meant it would have been saturated with all the other fission products. You had another study of the iodine-129 from Ottawa, Canada, 220 million atoms per liter. These are absurd numbers, because that means it's going to be saturated with plutonium, uranium, americium, neptunium, strontium. You had another study showing 450,000 times above detection levels in Washington of xenon, which burns a hole through your lungs, sequesters in your bones, and mutates your stem cells in your children and animals and mammals and birds and insects, persists for weeks. And here's that model actually right here. This is the xenon-133 model. This is pulsing energy, covering the whole planet, pulsing the speed of light. Right? This pulse is gamma, alpha, beta, neutrons. They pulse energy at the speed of light. How much evidence do you actually need? I wonder, because I got it. Yeah. Let me see what we got here. Japan's government agencies funding projects to monitor online info about Fukushima. Around-the-clock monitoring of blogs on nuclear power and Twitter accounts. They closed both of mine without even telling me why. Nuclear activists to be constantly spied upon. 12 million yen to censor Twitter. TEPCO has worked vigilantly to shut out close scrutiny of the ravaged plant's conditions. Work at Fukushima plant to go on for 10,000 years, longer than human history. The reactor should be entombed, radioactive and deadly for thousands of years. A sarcophagus should have been built over them, but they were too hot, right? TEPCO is not a decommissioning authority either. They have no rights to be in positions of authority. Fukushima reactor being encased in cement. So the whole story, Tokyo was 270 times more contaminated air samples than peak radioactive fallout from weapons, from the nuclear war. They call it weapons testing. It's nuclear war. Japan considering moving capital away from Tokyo. And Japan's prime minister to study setting up an alternative capital away from Tokyo. Because Tokyo was irradiated too. It wasn't just Fukushima prefecture. Food was banned from all of those prefectures in 55 countries. Alrighty then. Very, very good. So we got 44 votes. 95% says we should close all farms around nuclear power plants and the MOX nuclear fuel facilities, reprocessing plants. We'll close that down. And the poll, that was a great poll tonight, and we got to have a conversation. It's better to have it than not have it. How did we do tonight? Do a quick shout out, seems we're here. Fukushima Revelations. Dana Nasana. Hi Dana. Hi Ella. Ted Richards. Lori. I only served one king. Shayla White. Hi Shayla. Anna C3. Shane Clark. Warren. Andrew. Pretty quick. Yeah, we got a big show lineup already for tomorrow night. And so we got Powers to Core, COPS 26 going on in the United Kingdom on November the 10th. So the narrative's going to get brutal for the next week and a half, 2 weeks out there with the industry in full survival mode. Chad Johnson, Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Oh, good night, everybody. Hope everybody has a good night, a good day tomorrow. James Morgan, Mangan. Just scrolling down through the names quickly. Quick shout out to Katja. Hi, Katja. We need net zero of nuclear power. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Colette S. Hi, Colette. We get through everybody. Every night I manage to miss a couple of people. Every single time I go through the roll call, I read through comments after each time, right? And I always notice 2 or 3 people that I miss. It's bizarre. HTML, Sam, Mutant, Botanical Garden. Almost through it. There we go. Hope everybody's had a good day today. Tough gig. A lot of work into that today, believe it or not. Warren, looks like we got everybody. Yeah, lots of conversation going on there tonight. YouTube is even censoring my live chat, yeah? Wow. YouTube is scum for sure. You say I only got one thumb up on my last video since I done the show last night. John 2H. I turn that down in the background, I guess. Yeah, good night, everybody. Yeah, hugs for you, Colette. Thank you. Dan in the Sana, Sheila White, Shane, Mutant Botanical Garden, Johnson. Good night, everybody. Timeless Truth. Thank you. Hugs for everybody who shows up later. Tonight, tomorrow, next day. Watching this in the background. Bless all of you. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Tell your loved ones you love them. If everybody tries to do something to kill the nuclear industry, we'll be doing good, right? That's right, Kevin Blanche says, we will win the war. And this is the war. Make no mistake about it, folks. God bless. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody soon.